Hi guys, welcome back to another T45 online gi class. This week we are looking at some simple attacks you can do from top side control. Now, quite simple jiu-jitsu, but simple is good sometimes. You know, you don't need to have fancy stuff to tap people out. So this is just a couple of submissions that I like to play in sequence from side control that work against the majority of people I roll with. They're very, very simple, but it's just using a tiny bit of trickery, that's all. Okay, so to start with, we're just going to go through how I control side control. Now, it's a little bit different to what you're probably normally used to. So most people, when they play side control, and there's nothing wrong with this, it's just the way 90% of people are taught, is they're taught to get this cross face to turn the opponent's face away, and they're taught to get this far side grip here on the shoulder, and then maybe just hug around here or something. Or else they're taught to connect their two hands and to press down super heavy to get this kind of cross-face position. So the reason I don't like either of these position or controls anymore is I'm doing very, very little to control Laura's hips. So she has full mobility in her hips. So if she wants to shrimp and make space, she can. And if I'm an idiot, I'm going to get flattened out in a pretty bad guard and probably get submitted. So the reason I don't do that is if you want to control someone, you need to pin their hips. If you ever watch wrestling, it's always about pinning your opponent's hips. So what we're actually going to do with this side control is we're going to look at pinning our opponent's hips. So how I'll do that, I'm going to shift you a tiny bit over. Just give me this for a tiny bit. I just don't want to be too far off camera. So what we're going to do is instead of focusing all our energy here on our opponent's upper body, which is bad, we're going to take our arm and I'm going to pin my elbow into their hip. Now, if you've bony elbows like me, it's going to be uncomfortable for your partner, which is good, okay? Now, you don't have to grab, you don't have to do anything, you can just float this hand. I like having it free, that I can base and I can adjust as I need to. My opposite knee is going to pin their hip on the other side. And what this is doing is essentially just wedging in on their hips on both sides, and that's going to make it very hard for them to move their hips freely, which is what they'll need to do to escape. So just to prove the concept, what I like to do here is I like to take my second hand off completely. This is doing nothing on her upper body, and I'm just going to use my lower half of my body here to pin her. And as you can see, Laura can try as hard as she wants. She's not making much progress. Okay. Now, then our upper half, or the other half of our body is going to focus on their upper body. And we don't need a crazy cross face here. What we're going to do, we'll obviously isolate the arm. We get a little wedge under their shoulder and just under, a bit of a cross face, pin the hips. If this starts to get loose, don't worry. It's all about the pin on the hips. The pin on the hips is what's going to immobilize them and make it very hard for them to get an escape. Okay, so what we'll do now is a development drill. I like to do this for side control, as I think majority of people's escapes from side control are going to come from this kind of prayer position or kind of double frame position. And for them to get this double frame position, they need to get this elbow inside your hip line. So for that to happen, one, I have to be kind of not really active and not paying attention, but Laura did that there now nice and handy. And if I don't react, she's going to be able to make a better frame and make life uncomfortable for me and probably get an escape. So how I react to this is I'm going to go up my tippy toes and just hip in. My knee is going to come under her shoulder where my other knee was previously. And now I'm just going to pull the arm up. If I want to use if it's no gi, I'll just grab a handful of their tricep. If it's the gi, I can use the gi to pull it up. And now I'm going to walk back to my knees and readjust and get back to my position. Now, it's harder for Laura to get her elbow in, but she might. And again, I can switch my hips, lift, back, there. Switch my hips. Now, if I didn't like the person, I could probably smash them pretty hard with my hip, but don't do that to your training partners, guys. It's not a very nice thing to do. So one last time, we're here, switch my hips, here, pull up, and then here. Okay, so that's kind of your initial kind of side control position. I play like that control is a little bit different to the way A lot of people teach it. I just find it's much more powerful. You better control of their hips, and like I said, everything comes from the hips in jiu-jitsu. You have to be able to move your hips to escape. You have to be able to move your hips to submit someone. So as soon as you immobilize someone's hips, it becomes very hard for them to do what they want to do. Okay, so now we're just going to look at our first submission. All of the submissions today are going to come from the scarf hold or the kezigatami. How we're going to get there, again, I tend to wait until they get the hip in, and then I might, or the elbow in. As soon as the elbow's inside, that's when I'm going to be switching to my kezigatami. I might get here from a pass as well. That's another option. We're not worrying about that today. So from here, what I'm going to do is I might have to fight to get this arm under if she knows it's coming, but most of the time I'll probably have it on this side if I'm switching from the initial side control. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just try to get my thumb inside her gi and try not to pull all Laura's hair out here. So I'm just trying to get my thumb sitting inside her gi, just underneath her ear. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place on my hand, I step over with my leg, and I'm just going to pull my hand straight, and I'm going to back heel with my foot to get a tap. It's a it should be a choke, but it might be a bit of a neck crank. So try to get the choke. It takes a bit of practice. If your partner feels like you're pulling the head off them, you're probably doing it wrong. So try to focus a little bit more on the arm pull rather than the kick. If you're kicking without pulling the arm, it's going to turn into more of a neck crank. So another time we're here, I step over, I'm going to back heel, nice and easy. So I do the whole lot from side control. So I'm in my side control, I'm here, lower defense, I'm here, set this up, step over. Nice little submission there. So now the next submission we're going to look at is probably my favourite thing to attack from the scarf hold, and it's the near side armbar. Now how I'll set up the near side armbar is if they're stiff arming, or otherwise if I have an overhook like this on their arm, I can set it up. Okay, if Laura starts to push a little bit here, I can weave. I might need to suck my chest in a tiny bit to make space, and now I can overhook that arm. So once I have this position here, what I'm going to do is find the hard part of my palm. You don't know what that part of your hand is called. It's like the bottom half of your palm, just where the wrist is. Very hard part. And what we're going to do is find that and line it up with Laura's elbow. Takes a bit of practice, especially in the gi, because you can't see where her elbow is. But you can feel the bony part of her elbow, and that's where you want to sit your hand, just on there. Okay? So from here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to step my top leg over. Again, similar to what we were doing with the choke. Now, you can attack the armbar here, but what will happen if you don't secure this arm, if you don't secure the leg with your hand, it'll just get pushed off. Now, we'll look at that in a second, but ideally, if you're flexible enough, grab your foot, because now that leg's not going anywhere, and she's in a pretty precarious position. So what I'm going to do now is drive my hips forward and roll my shoulder back to get a tap. So again, I'm here, I set it up, nice and easy, line my wrist up with her elbow, step over, grab my foot, here, drive. Nice quick submission there. So one last time, I'm here, I might be hand fighting a little bit. If you feel like you're going to lose your balance, you're going to have to go back to your knees temporarily. The worst thing you can do here is chase that armbar when they're pushing you, and then you end up going flying back, which is not good, because then you end up in a complete reversal of the position. So if they're pushing you back, you might need to readjust. But we're just going to weave through, get the overhook, find the elbow, step over, grab my foot. I'm here in a good strong position, and I'm just going to drive, get the submission. Okay? And that's the first two submissions from this position, and the last thing we're going to do now is get us it will set us up into the mouse trap. So anyone who's trained with me, we've done the mouse trap a few times, or if you don't know what the mouse trap is, it's just the far side armbar and Kimura system. So what we'll do is we'll actually set up the Americana part of that, but you can easily transfer straight into the mouse trap from there. So again, we're in the kezigatami position. I'm here, and I'm going to go for that armbar. I set up my armbar, I find Laura's elbow. She's hiding it on me this time, so I go to step over. But this time I don't secure my leg, and she starts to push. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wrist, go wrist to wrist. Now if I start to arm wrestle Laura here, I'll probably lose because her arm is actually at a better extension than mine. It doesn't even matter if we're the same size and strength. Because her arm is slightly more locked out than mine, it's actually harder for me to start pushing against it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to get my body involved. I'm actually going to turn my body over her arm towards the mat. So I'm going to turn like this, and that's going to flatten her arm out. Even if Laura resists, it will go. From here, I just lock. Now, we're not going to start wrenching the Kimura up like this because it won't really submit her. What we're going to do is paintbrush it. So I'm going to paintbrush her wrist towards her hip and lift the elbow at the same time to get the submission. Okay? So again, I'm here. I set up my initial armbar attack. I'm here trying to find the elbow before I do anything else. I'm here, I step over, lower the fence, wrist to wrist, and flat down. But that's the transition. So again, you're here, armbar, here, wrist to wrist, flatten out. Lock it, and from here you're going to paintbrush to get the submission. Okay? So that's kind of the class this week, guys. Some pretty simple attacks. They're nice low risk attacks that work from side control. You don't always have to look, it doesn't have to be this mad, crazy spinning heel hook, flying armbar. It doesn't have to be any of that stuff. Sometimes it's nice just to keep control of the roll, especially towards the end of the match. You might be tired, you get side control. Don't give it up for some position that's going to, or a submission that's going to give up top position. Look for these nice simple options. They're good, they work. And we might look at some more options kind of similar to this in the next couple of weeks. But I hope you enjoyed the class, guys. Have a good one.